Now that we have looked and analyzed changes in vegetation greenness in Ecuador, let's look at some questions that may have come up during all this module. Let's pass it to Lucas.
Great. I guess my first question is, what got you interested in vegetation greening as a concept?
Great question. I think it was mostly climate change and the global impact of climate change, knowing that the tropical forests, the tropical rainforests are reacting in a certain way, and the lack of knowledge that we had about other regions such as the tropical Andes. I would say that that was the main driver.
Did you consider using other indices besides NDVI for your research?
Other indices, yes. I did look at EVI at some point, but with AVHRR, NDVI was the best, and given the time frame or the study that we needed something from the 80s, NDVI with AVHRR was the only option. So I did look at other indices, but given that I really wanted to pick up to study the 80s, the NDVI that we use that is derived from AVHRR was the best option.
How do you think land cover change patterns might be affecting your findings?
Good question. Land cover change. I think at the scale of 4 kilometers, which is about the pixel size of the NDVI data that we use, land cover change should have a relatively minimal impact. With that said, I have to acknowledge that a lot of coastal Ecuador has been almost completely clear, but what we're really picking is the phenology of vegetation, which includes natural forests and also includes managed lands. But if we were to change this analysis or continue this analysis with finer resolution sensors, land cover change will become more important.
Do you have any insights as to what may have happened in Ecuador since 2010?
Good one too. In Ecuador, we don't really have a lot of information. We do have some information in general about the tropics. There are some research that suggests the tropics are becoming a source of carbon instead of a single carbon, and there is a lot of complex processes associated with that. On one hand, you have that apparently enough is enough. The tropical forests cannot fix more CO2 even if we put it up in the atmosphere, but you also have important human impacts. Deforestation, particularly in the Brazilian Amazon, it's high, and then you also have the effect of fires that interact with changes in climate and also human alterations of land cover. So we have some evidence that suggests that there is greening it's reducing. In general, for the Amazon basin, we don't have anything specific for the other areas of the tropical Andes analyzed in this study, particularly the coast of Ecuador and the Andean mountains.
So building off of that, what do we know about the broader ecological ramifications of these findings?
Same like with more research in general, I think we have some insights from the Brazilian Amazon. There is long-term monitoring in the Brazilian Amazon that suggests that there are changes in community composition of trees and also changes in stem density. So we do have some idea of some of the ecological ramifications, and if you have that at the scale of a forest, you will expect changes in different levels of the ecosystem as well. We don't have any data of that type for Ecuador.
How would you include a more human perspective into this mostly biophysical study?
Thanks for that question. I think the best way to include a human component would be to analyze people's perceptions. And I'm interested in doing that. I think it will be very interesting, particularly with indigenous communities, but also with farmers and with regular people, to try to see if the changes that we see with the satellite imagery are changes that they have also perceived or that they think that they have happened as well. So it will be interesting to try to couple what I do with remote sensing analysis with a long-term survey analysis of how people have seen forests are changing in their lands.
Well, what's something that you learned during this whole research process?
I will say that, like with any other research process, the main thing is to know well the limitations of your data. So in my case, and particular, and in general in remote sensing, it's sometimes oversold. So I think I have tried to be very careful when I'm asked about the implications of my findings or the ecological ramifications of my findings, because I did an analysis at a certain resolution, at a certain time frame, and any extrapolation has to be done considering that. So knowing the limitations of the data is something that was like a big take home, I would say.
I think our last question is just, we want to know what other research you're conducting right now, if any.
Yeah, thanks. I want to continue this research, and at some point I think it will be interesting to include the entire gradient, including Colombia and Peru, to fully understand the relationship between precipitation and changes in vegetation greenness across the Andes. So that's for the future, but I also have some other studies that are looking at land cover change, particularly deforestation and forest recovery in coastal Ecuador. This is an area considered a biodiversity hotspot, so very important for conservation, but also an area that has a lot of interesting social issues. So I'm trying to include a little bit that human aspect and trying to see how can we promote biodiversity conservation in this landscape where it's very important for biodiversity, but it's also private land that has been already severely impacted by people.
Interesting. All right, well, thanks so much for talking with us and answering our questions, and thanks to all of you for watching this module.
Thanks to everyone, and if you have a question, don't hesitate to contact me. The contact information is at the very end of this module.